Hi guys, welcome back to Dimitra's Dishes. This is going to be my first video since I have my new kitchen up after the flood. If you don't already know, Harvey hit us and they hit my house and I didn't have a kitchen, which is why I've been gone for like 2-3 months. But we're back and we're going to be posting videos as often as I can. And the first one that I'm going to be posting is my vegetarian moussaka. I was recipe testing a few weeks ago and I put it up on Instagram and Facebook, and many of you guys wanted to have the recipe. I already made a meat version of this, which is super delicious, and it's the classic Greek moussaka, and I'm going to post in the description box the link to that video and to that recipe. It's delicious. Let's begin making this. I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees because we're going to roast our vegetables instead of frying them. You could totally fry them. I'm making it healthy, and also it makes much less of a mess. You fry them, of course, they probably taste way better, but we're keeping it nice and healthy. Let's go on this side so I can prep the vegetables. Alright, so we're going to begin with potatoes, and we're using many more potatoes than these two that I have over here, but I've already roasted some just so that way we can get this video moving a little bit faster. And let me show you, I cut one part off the potato so I could have a level surface, and then I'm just going to cut slices, and you really don't have to measure, they just have to be about ½ an inch or so, just kind of like this. You can do it thinner if you want, if you don't have too many potatoes, but I like them to be a little hearty, so I don't go too thin. So I'm just going to season these potatoes with a little bit of olive oil. So we're going to put some oregano, dried oregano, some salt, a little bit of cumin powder, just for that earthiness, a little bit of black pepper, and because I love a little bit of heat, I'm going to put a tiny bit of crushed red pepper flakes. If you don't want it spicy, just totally leave it out. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, minus the olive oil, because I have enough on here. Once everything is seasoned on both sides, you're going to put it in your preheated oven between 400 to 425 degrees Fahrenheit for about 15 to 20 minutes. Sometimes it can take 25. You want to make sure the potatoes are fully cooked and they're going to get nice and crisp on the edges. Alright, so next what we're going to do, we're going to take a nice big eggplant, try to get the freshest that you can get, and with a peeler we're just going to peel off just part of the, a few slices of the peel, just because it tends to be a little tough, and you don't have to do this. It's just a matter of preference. Put that on the side for the vegetable garden, and then we're going to cut it into the same size, about ½ inch thick rounds, just like we did with the potatoes. And again, this recipe calls for 3 large eggplants, but if you're not a huge fan of eggplant, just leave it out, and you can substitute zucchini for it if you like. That tastes really good too. I wasn't really a fan of eggplant until I grew up. Anytime my aunt or my mom would make moussaka for me, they would leave out the eggplant and make it with zucchini because I always loved zucchini. So as I grew up, my taste preference has changed and I really love eggplant now, so I'm using it. And then I'm not going to peel the zucchini at all. I'm just going to cut the edges and save them for the vegetable garden. We like to compost around here. And then I'm just going to cut this into slices as well and put it on my baking tray. So we're just going to brush some olive oil over all our vegetables, and these seem to be a little bit crowded, so what I'll do is after about 10 minutes that my potatoes have been in the oven, I'm just going to put some zucchini on that tray, because zucchini cooks way faster than potatoes, so I can just use the space of the same tray so I don't dirty another one. And you really don't want to overcrowd your tray when you're roasting vegetables, otherwise they get, instead of getting roasted, they kind of release their water and then they don't get brown, and you know, you just kind of lose a little bit of the whole point of roasting. Now we're just going to season with some salt and pepper, both sides, and then we'll pop this in the oven as well for about 15 to 20 minutes or until they are fully cooked and golden. Okay, so while the potatoes and the zucchini and the eggplant are cooking in the oven, I'm cooking my onions. So you want to reduce the heat to about a medium-low once the oil and everything heats up really well, so that way the onions cook on a low heat, so that way they become translucent and golden rather than brown. You're not looking for a brown color. And I found that a nice trick is if you put the whole peeled garlic in with the onion at the beginning of cooking, it roasts and it cooks all together, and then you do not have to mince at all. You just skip that step and less work, and then you get a nice roasted taste of garlic in here. I'm going to cover this and let it go for about 15 minutes while I clean up a bit, and then we're going to move on to making the sauce. So right after about 10 to 15 minutes, when the onions are completely cooked, you want to go in there and just smash up the garlic so it's kind of crushed, and then it's going to melt into the sauce. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to turn the heat off because I'm going to go to the other side and chop up my mushrooms. So now for my sauce, it's completely optional. I like to add in red sauce, especially when it's in like a vegetarian dish, I like to chop up some olives. I have Kalamata olives, about 6 to 8. I chop them up and I remove the pits. And then I have some mushrooms. These are some baby portobello mushrooms, which are the ones that I really like to use. Use whatever mushrooms that you have. I'm using about half a pound here. And the best way to clean mushrooms is with a damp towel. Just go all around it, never run them under water because then they're just gonna get gummy and gross. So just with a damp towel, go around them and just clean them. I remove the stems, and I'm saving the stems for like another, for a stock or for another recipe. I'm really not gonna use them in this recipe. Just like that, they're clean. And now I'm just gonna go ahead and slice these and then just chop them. And I like to chop them pretty small, because these are going to be part of the sauce. So now I'm just going to turn the heat on high underneath my pan, pop these in this pot right here, and cook them with a little bit of salt until they just get a little bit brown, which is going to take just a few minutes. Alright, so once the mushrooms get a little bit nice and brown, it just takes about 2-3 minutes. You want to take your tomato sauce or tomato puree, whatever you have. I'm using about 28 ounces, and just put it in there. And I never like to waste. I like to rinse out my cans, so I'm gonna rinse them out with a little bit of water so I can get every last bit of sauce in here. And then we're gonna let this cook for about 15 minutes or so, maybe 10 to 15 minutes until it thickens. I'll also season it with a little bit of salt and pepper and some oregano. And then finally, when it's done, we're just going to finish it off with some fresh parsley and those sliced Kalamata olives that we have on the side. If you wanted to, you could also put a nice pinch of crushed red pepper flakes, which I'm going to go and grab and put in here. I'm going to cover this, let this cook down until it's nice and thick, and then I'll taste the seasoning and see if it needs anything else, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, so at this point, once the sauce is nice and thick, and thicken it to whatever consistency you like. If you want more sauce, you could leave it on the thinner side. If you want less sauce and more concentrated, you can just cook it down a little bit more. And it tastes perfect to me. I think it might be needing a tiny bit more salt. If your canned tomato puree is very concentrated and acidic, you can go ahead and add a tiny pinch of sugar, maybe like a 1/4 teaspoon or so. I'm gonna add my chopped fresh parsley and the delicious sliced Kalamata olives. So our red sauce is made, our vegetables are roasted. Now before we put everything together, we're just going to get our bechamel ready, and this is the same bechamel sauce that I use in my pasticcio and my moussaka recipe. But before that, let me just talk about one thing. In my red sauce, I have mushrooms, and some people are not fans of mushrooms, they don't like them. Even though they have a really good texture and really good flavor and earthy notes that they add to this dish, I think you should give it a try before you leave it out. But if you really don't like them, you can do two things. You can roast extra eggplant and just chop it up and add it to the sauce. That'll add more kind of like body and richness to it. Or what you can do is you can cook like about, I would say, half a cup of lentils, just the regular lentils, boil them in salted water and all of that until they're cooked, and then you add those to the sauce, and those will also add another layer of richness and earthiness and heartiness to this recipe. But my all-time favorite is using the mushrooms, so that's what I do, but you can do either or. Let's move on now to making our bechamel sauce. I'm going to turn the heat on under my pot, and I have some olive oil in here. Okay, so to my oil, we're going to make a roux now, which a roux is basically equal parts of flour and oil. So I'm going to add my all-purpose flour and just let it cook down until it gets nice and nutty and toasted. And that just takes just a few minutes over high heat. So once it begins to cook and bubble up, you'll smell the flour begin to get a little bit of nice toasty aroma, and then you know it's ready. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to add our whole milk. Now I'm going to reduce the heat a little bit so it doesn't bubble up vigorously. A trick to making the sauce come together faster is to slightly warm up your milk. You can do this in the microwave, or you can do it over the stove in another pot. A little bit of pepper, a little bit of salt. Be careful not to add too much salt because we're going to add cheese to this sauce, and the cheese is going to be nice and salty, so we don't want to overdo it. And just a little bit of nutmeg, just about a 1/4 teaspoon. If you have fresh nutmeg, be my guest, go ahead and use it. I didn't, so I'm going to increase the heat a little bit so it can come to a boil. We're going to cook this until it thickens. All right, so once it's nice and thick like this, once it starts bubbling, you're going to see that it's begin to thicken really nicely. And at this point, you want to turn off the heat and get your eggs ready. So we're going to use 2 whole eggs and 2 egg yolks. We're going to save the whites for an omelet for maybe for tomorrow morning, or some scrambled eggs. Give it a nice little whisk, and then we're just going to temper these eggs, which just means that we're going to bring their temperature up. We're going to raise their temperature so that way when we add the eggs to this cream mixture, they don't curdle and become scrambled, which is what eggs tend to do when they go from cold to hot. So you want to have a nice, creamy, rich sauce, not one with scrambled eggs in it. So make sure you don't skip this step. Once you add a few spoonfuls of the sauce, the eggs start to smooth out and become nice and silky and sort of like one with the mixture. Then you know they're ready. So we're just going to add this to the sauce. Don't want to waste any. And then we're going to add a little bit of Parmesan cheese, a nice big handful, about 3/4 cup to a cup if you're measuring, but I never really measure cheese. The more the better, that's my rule. And just like that, the sauce is ready. Now we're just going to put everything all together. So we're just going to begin by layering our potatoes and making a nice layer on the bottom of the pan. So once we have a layer of potatoes, we're going to do a little sprinkling of cheese on top, and this is shredded Parmesan. And then we're going to do a layer of our eggplant. And we can put some zucchini to fill in the spaces. And then we're going to take some of our delicious red sauce, and we're going to put half of the red sauce on this layer. Just like that. I'm going to put a little bit more Parmesan cheese on top of that, and then we're going to top it with some zucchini slices. Now if you run out of any slices, just go ahead and cover the spaces with some more of the eggplant. We'll do a nice layer of potatoes and a layer of more sauce. We'll do all of the rest of the tomato sauce. Again, a nice layer of cheese. And then we'll alternate with the final layer with potatoes and eggplant. We'll do a little bit, whatever cheese is left over. And then we're going to top it with our bechamel sauce. So I layered mine very, very generously. You can put a little bit fewer vegetables in here because as you can see it's kind of overflowing. That's going to be fine. We're just going to bake it a little bit longer. My oven is preheated to 400 degrees. I'm going to bake this in there for about 45 minutes to an hour until it's golden brown on top and really nice and bubbly. So once the moussaka comes out of the oven, you want to make sure you give it at least 20 to 30 minutes so that way it can set. Otherwise, you're going to end up having to scoop it out, and it's going to still taste good, but it won't stay together, and it won't taste at its best. So it sat for quite a while, and now I'm going to cut a piece out. You can get at least 12 really nice sized portions out of this deliciousness. You see what I mean? If you let it set for a little while, it's still juicy, but it stays all together so perfectly. So creamy, I cannot wait to taste this. But before I do, let me just say a few things. So the first time I made the sauce and I made it much thicker. And I think I would go with the thicker sauce rather than the thinner sauce that I made. So you're gonna wanna cook it down at least 15-20 minutes until it thickens, and you're gonna just see, it's just gonna look not like pizza sauce, but it is gonna be a very thick sauce, and it's not gonna be watery at all. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna leave less liquid in your final product. It's going to be delicious. So kind of keep your sauce on the thicker side. That's a definite a must. So it's still going to be good. Mine is going to be a little bit more runny, but as you can see, it's not falling apart, and that's all that matters. This is perfect for entertaining a large crowd. Really nice if you want to make it for any special get-together and you're having people that don't eat meat over. But honestly, even the people who do eat meat, it's good to take a break every now and then. And this dish is one of those that you just won't miss it. Let me take a bite. So good. Every layer is perfectly seasoned, and that's important when you're making a dish that has different layers, so like this one. I had to take that bite because that had an olive in it, and I feel like olive and tomato sauce just go so good together. Give this one a try. Let me know what you think. Post in the comment section down below how you made it. If you used eggplant in the sauce, or if you did what I did with the mushrooms, or maybe you added lentils. Let me know what you think and what you want to learn how to make next. Post your comments down below. Subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notifications tab so you don't miss a delicious recipe. The recipe will be in the description box down below. It'll take you straight to my website, www.dimitrasdishes.com. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye everyone.